I spent Mother's Day sitting at a table set for three, and I was the only one who showed up. My children were supposed to be there, but instead they were laughing at a party across town. I didn't know it yet, but that would be the last Mother's Day I ever spent waiting for them. Because that night, while wiping my tears in the dark, I remembered something they didn't know existed: my one-way ticket. I had been up since early morning, moving slower than I used to, but still moving. I ironed the good tablecloth the night before, the one my own mother gave me. I laid out the china I only used for special occasions, even though life hadn't given me many of those. I folded cloth napkins into neat little shapes and placed them on the plates as if I were expecting honored guests instead of my own children, who treated me like an afterthought. By 11, everything was ready. The chicken was roasting, filling the house with warmth and herbs, potatoes peeled, seasoned, and waiting, salad washed, dressing prepared, a small vase of supermarket flowers in the middle of the table, bought with what was left of my monthly check. It wasn't much, but I told myself it looked festive. The day before, I had called them just to be sure. First, my daughter. "Alana, baby, are you coming tomorrow?" I asked. Her voice rushed through the phone like she was doing 10 things at once. "Yes, Mama, of course we're coming. I'll pick Darius up on the way. Don't stress, okay?" Then my son. "Darius, you'll be here for brunch tomorrow?" "Yeah, Ma." "I'll be there," he said. "Don't worry about it." He hung up quickly, but I still smiled. This time will be different, I thought. This time they'll remember. At noon, I sat down in the living room and glanced at the clock. "They're always a little late," I whispered to myself. By 12:30, a familiar tightness formed in my chest. By 1, the chicken was ready, golden, and perfect. I took it out, set it on the counter, and listened to the silence. It's fine, they're just stuck in traffic, I thought. At 2, I called Alana. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. I called Darius. His phone didn't even ring. That tightness in my chest spread up to my throat. I walked to the window and watched other families pass by on the sidewalk. Kids carrying flowers, sons with balloons, daughters holding their mother's arms. I could almost feel the sound of their laughter pressing against my windows. Inside my house, there were 3 plates and one old woman. I went back to the table and sat down across from the empty chairs. The food steamed between us like a joke only the universe found funny. Time stretched and blurred. 3 o'clock, 4, 5. The sunlight shifted and slowly slid off the walls. Eventually, the food cooled and congealed, the flowers drooped, my hope did the same. At 6, I finally stood up on aching knees. I put the chicken in containers, shoved the potatoes into the fridge, covered the salad. I folded the napkins back into dull lumps of cloth and tossed the wilted flowers in the trash. They fell in with a soft thud, like something being buried. Then I sat on the sofa and the tears came, not loud and shaking, but quiet and heavy. The kind that start somewhere deep, where you hide all the disappointments you never dare say out loud. I cried for every Mother's Day I'd spent alone. I cried for all the holidays they skipped with flimsy excuses. I cried because I was 70 years old and still waiting for my children to choose me. At some point, I stopped watching the clock. The house darkened around me, but I didn't move to turn on the lights. I just sat there in the dimness, listening to the sound of my own breathing and the slow, dull ache of something inside me finally breaking. Around 10 at night, I heard a car engine outside and knew immediately whose it was. Darius, the slam of doors, laughter drifting in, the smell of alcohol and expensive perfume following as they opened the door without knocking. The light snapped on, stabbing my tired eyes. "Hey, Mama, we thought we'd drop by," Alana said, grinning, her dress glittering under the living room light, her makeup flawless. Darius walked in behind her, wearing new shoes and a shirt I had never seen. He gave me that easy smile he reserved for moments when he needed something. "How was your day, Ma?" he asked, as if my answer mattered. My voice wouldn't come. I just stared at them, at their clothes, their hair, their glow that said they had been anywhere but here. They took one look around, but they didn't ask about the table that had clearly been set and then cleared. They didn't notice my swollen eyes. "Mama, we need to talk," Alana said, slipping into the armchair like she lived there. "Yeah, Ma, we got a problem," Darius added, sitting on the arm of the sofa beside me. I already knew. "It's the bills." "Everything piled up," Alana continued. "Darius's rent, my credit card, it's about 3 grand. We just need you to lend it to us till we catch up." They looked at me expectantly, like children asking for a cookie, not adults asking their elderly mother for $3,000 after ditching her on Mother's Day. And that was the moment something inside me shifted permanently. Because they didn't know that upstairs, in my nightstand drawer, there was an envelope. In that envelope was a bus ticket, a one-way ticket to a small town by the coast where no one knew the name, Margaret Ellis. A ticket I'd bought in secret, thinking I might never have the courage to use it. As they spoke about their urgent bills, I looked at them and finally saw the truth in full daylight. My children would never change. Not by themselves, not for me. If anything was going to change, it would have to be me. And that one-way ticket suddenly felt less like a fantasy and more like a door I was finally brave enough to open. My name is Margaret Ellis. I am 70 years old and I have been a mother for 48 of those years. There was a time when the word mama sounded like love. Somewhere along the way, it started sounding like a job title with no retirement plan. It wasn't always like this. Once, my whole world fit in a tiny house on the edge of a small Georgia town. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen so cramped we had to dance around each other while cooking. We were poor, but I didn't feel poor when my husband was still alive and the kids were little. Back then, Alana would run into the house yelling, Mama, as if saying my name solved all her problems. She'd wrap her arms around my neck and talk so fast I could barely keep up. Darius would follow behind, shoes dirty, eyes bright, eager to tell me about the bugs he found, the picture he drew, the silly thing his teacher said. Their father, James, worked construction. He wasn't a big talker, but he was kind. He'd come home exhausted, sit at the table, and eat whatever I'd cooked without complaining. Sometimes he'd look at me across the table and say, Thanks, Maggie, you always make it work. Those 5 words were enough to keep me going. Then one day, the phone rang, and everything before that moment became the time when James was still alive. A beam fell at the job site, that's what they said. It was quick, they assured me, like that was supposed to soften the blow. He was 42, I was 38. Alana was 12, Darius was 10. One moment I was someone's wife. The next, I was a widow with 2 kids, no savings, and a body built for cleaning, not resting. They gave me a widow's benefit, a number so small it would have been funny if it hadn't been tragic. It barely covered groceries, let alone rent or school supplies. So I did what mothers like me do, I worked. Mornings, I scrubbed other people's kitchens and bathrooms until my hands cracked. Afternoons, I washed and ironed their clothes. Nights, I stood over an ironing board until my vision blurred. I slept 4 hours if I was lucky, and even then, my dreams were filled with unpaid bills and growing children. My back began to ache constantly, my knees protested every step, and my hands knotted from all the scrubbing and wringing. But when I watched Alana and Darius sleeping, full bellies and peaceful faces, I told myself it was worth it. I believed, with all the faith of a foolish mother, that someday they would understand and be grateful. Alana, my eldest, learned quickly how to be responsible. Too quickly, maybe. She helped with Darius, cooked simple dinners when I couldn't get home in time, and tried to keep the house from falling apart. I felt guilty watching her grow up too fast, forced into adulthood while still a child. Darius, on the other hand, was my little dreamer. He scribbled on every scrap of paper he could find, drawing houses and cars, worlds where everything was bright and full. He would say, Mama, when I grow up, I'm going to be famous. I'll buy you a big house and you won't have to work anymore. And I believed him. Of course I did. That's what mothers do. We believe in our children even when reality suggests we shouldn't. As they grew, the house felt smaller, not because the walls moved, but because their desires did. Alana started noticing what other girls had: better clothes, nicer houses, parents who didn't come home smelling like bleach and fatigue. She began to look at me with a quiet anger that cut deeper than any insult, as if my failure to provide more was a personal betrayal. Darius changed too. The boy who once filled notebooks with drawings stopped sketching altogether. He started hanging around older boys, coming home later, answering my questions with grunts or not at all. He shut the door to his room and slowly to his heart. Still, I kept working. I kept sacrificing. I told myself, one day they'll realize, one day they'll say, Thank you, Mama. That day never came. Alana turned 18 and got a job at a store downtown. I thought finally some relief. Maybe she'd help with the bills. Maybe I could cut back one house cleaning job. But every paycheck went to new outfits, new shoes, dinners out with friends. When I asked her to contribute just a little, she looked at me like I had asked her to amputate a limb. Darius barely scraped through school and refused college. It's not for me, he said. I'll make money my own way. He started working at a mechanic shop, earning enough to help if he wanted to. Instead, after a few months, he announced he was moving in with friends. I'm grown, Ma. I can't live with you forever, he said, like I'd been begging him to stay. I helped pack his things. I slipped money into his pocket for the first month's rent. Money I didn't have, money that came out of the small savings I'd scraped together over the years. I stood on the porch and watched him walk away without looking back. Alana left a couple of years later. She met a man, moved in with him, married him in a wedding where I felt like a stranger in the background. I sat at a corner table, unintroduced, unseen, the bride's mother and nothing more. The marriage ended 3 years later. She came back to my house in tears, stayed 6 months, healed her heart, and then left again without so much as a real thank you. But when they needed something, money for emergencies, help with unpaid bills, they always remembered my number: 200 here, 500 there, 1,000 for something urgent. I gave and gave, cutting my pills in half to stretch prescriptions, wearing the same coat winter after winter, pretending I wasn't hungry when my pantry was almost empty. Because they were my children. Because I loved them. Because I thought I was investing in a future where they might finally love me back in the way I'd always imagined. Instead, I became a quiet machine. Input their problems, output my money. Until that Mother's Day, when the machine jammed, and for the first time in my life, I wondered, what if I stopped running for them and started walking for myself? The night they came back from the party asking for $3,000, I lied. I don't have it, I told them, folding my hands in my lap to hide the way they trembled. Alana frowned, that offended look she used whenever life dared to deny her. Come on, Mama. You always have something saved. You always help us. You're seriously telling me you can't do it this one time, when we really need it? This isn't a whim, Ma, Darius added. These are serious bills. If we don't pay, we'll be in trouble. I watched them talk about trouble while completely blind to the trouble they'd already put me in for years. The missed medications, the eating less to save more, the quiet fear of bills I barely managed to pay. No, I repeated. I can't help this time. The word felt strange in my mouth, heavy but solid. They didn't like it. Unbelievable, Alana muttered as she stood. The one time we actually need you. Darius shook his head. We'll figure it out then. Thanks anyway. They left as quickly as they'd arrived, without asking how my day had been, without noticing the tablecloth still folded on a chair, the faint smell of roasted chicken in the air, the evidence of a celebration that never happened. When the door closed, the silence returned, thick as fog. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it. My mind kept circling the same questions. How much had I given them? Where was all their money going? And the one I'd been too afraid to ask, did they love me at all, or had they just learned how to use me? The next morning, I did something I almost never did. I picked up my phone and opened the social media app Alana had installed for me years ago. She'd shown me how to scroll, how to like, how to look at pictures. I rarely used it. It always felt like peeking into a world where I didn't belong. That day, I went looking for answers. I typed in my daughter's name. Her profile appeared, bright and polished. Picture after picture of Alana in expensive restaurants, holding cocktails in tall glasses, posing in new dresses, sitting by the beach with her feet in the sand, laughing like life had never once been hard. There she was last night in a photo with friends, all done up, drinks in hand, a caption beneath it, "Perfect day with my favorites." Perfect day. While I sat alone with a cold chicken and a set table, she was celebrating a perfect day. I kept scrolling. More restaurants, more shopping, more trips, all funded apparently by the same woman she'd just told we're in trouble, we can't pay our bills. Then I searched for Darius. His profile was just as loud. Pictures at bars, posing by a shiny new car I'd never seen before, wearing designer sneakers that probably cost more than my entire monthly grocery budget. Shots from concerts, nights out, weekends away. A lifestyle that didn't match the story of a man who couldn't cover his rent. My stomach twisted. Shock bled into something colder, a realization that I wasn't just overlooked, I was being played. And then I saw it. A screenshot Alana had posted by mistake, or maybe she just didn't care who saw it. It was from a group chat titled Ellis Kids. Only two names in it, hers and Darius's. At the top, Darius had written, "Did you ask the old lady yet?" Below, Alana's reply, "Not yet, but I know what to say. I'll tell her it's urgent. You know how she is, she always falls for it." Then Darius, "LOL, yeah, poor thing. But hey, that's what she's got us for, right? To look after her when she's ancient. Until then, she can keep funding us a little longer." I read it once, twice, three times, the old lady, poor thing, funding us, my vision blurred. I set the phone down before my hands dropped it. I walked to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Staring back at me was a tired woman with deep lines carved by years of frowning and worry. White hair pulled back in a bun. Shoulders slightly stooped from decades of bending over other people's messes. This was me, Margaret Ellis. The woman who had buried her husband too young, who had worked herself half broken for her children, who had believed every trembling story about emergencies. And to them, I was nothing but the old lady and a walking wallet. I could have collapsed right there. Instead, I went to my bedroom, pulled my old metal box out of the closet, and sat on the bed. Inside that box were years of receipts, notes, payment slips. Little records I'd kept out of habit more than intention. I started sorting them, one by one, muttering amounts under my breath. 200, 300, 500. I added them up on a notepad, rewriting the total each time it climbed. By the time I finished, the number stared up at me like a slap. $20,000. In 5 years, I had given my children $20,000 from my small check and my small life. Money I'd saved by going without, weakening my own body and comfort, while they laughed, drank, traveled, and joked about how easy it was to work me. Something inside me hardened. If I didn't end this, it would continue until I died. And if I let it continue, I wouldn't just be a victim, I'd be a volunteer. I closed the box, wiped my eyes, and took a slow breath. For the first time in 70 years, I decided something radical. I was going to put myself first. And I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I picked up the phone, scrolled through my contacts, and called the only person who had never once made me feel like a burden. Rosa, I said when she answered. It's Margaret, I need your help. Rosa Johnson had lived down the street from me years ago, back when both of us were younger and our husbands were still alive. When her husband passed, I took her casseroles, slipped a little money into her hand when I could, sat with her in the quiet when grief made words impossible. Unlike my own children, Rosa never forgot that. Hearing her voice on the phone felt like stepping into warm sunlight. Margaret, it's so good to hear from you. How are you, girl? I opened my mouth to say, fine, the automatic answer, but what came out instead was a shaky, I'm not okay, Rosa. She didn't brush it off or change the subject. Tell me what's going on, she said gently. I'm listening. We met the next morning at my kitchen table. She brought coffee and pastries, like it was a celebration instead of a confession. I spread out the receipts, the printed screenshots, the scribbled totals. I told her everything, from Mother's Day brunch to the Ellis kids, chat calling me, the old lady they were funding. Rosa listened without interrupting, her brow furrowing, her jaw tightening. When I finished, I felt strangely empty, like I'd poured out every last drop of shame and hurt onto the table between us. Margaret, she said quietly, this has to stop. I know, I whispered, but how? They're my children. They're grown adults, she corrected gently. And they're using you. You didn't raise them to be like this, but they chose it anyway. Now you have to choose you. Rosa had a nephew who worked at a law firm in the city. He's a good boy, she said. Straight shooter. I'll call him, see if he can meet with you. You need someone to help you protect what's left. 3 days later, I sat in a small office across from a man in his mid-30s with kind eyes and a serious expression. I'm Daniel Carter, he said, extending a hand. Rosa told me a bit about your situation, Mrs. Ellis. Why don't you tell me the rest in your own words? So I did. I told him about the years of giving, the endless requests, the $20,000, the Mother's Day table, the group chat, all of it. He didn't look bored or impatient. He took notes like every detail mattered. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, hands steepled. First, he said, I want you to understand something clearly. You are not obligated, legally or morally, to keep funding your adult children's lifestyle. You've fulfilled your duties as a parent. They are responsible for themselves now. I blinked. It sounded simple when he said it, but to me, it felt like learning gravity had changed overnight. We're going to do a few things, he continued. 1. Review your will. 2. Protect your assets. 3. Limit their access to your finances. I told him I already had a will written years ago, leaving everything equally to Alana and Darius. That can be changed, he said calmly. It's your property, your money, your choice. You can leave it to whomever you want. A friend, a charity, a church. You're under no obligation to leave anything to your children if you don't feel they've earned that trust. I had never considered that possibility. In my mind, whatever little I had automatically belonged to them as some sort of unspoken rule of motherhood. He explained how we could create a new will, how we could open a new bank account they didn't know about, how we could move my pension deposits there, and leave only enough in the old account to pay bills and appear modest. He suggested changing beneficiaries on any accounts and having everything documented properly so there would be no confusion later. How much will all this cost? I asked, bracing myself. For everything, drafting a new will, updating designations, setting things up correctly, about $500, he said. It was a large amount for me. I almost said I couldn't do it, but Rosa had already pressed an envelope into my hand that morning. Use it, she'd said, And don't argue, you've helped me, now let me help you. I hired Daniel on the spot. He gave me a list of documents to bring: deeds, bank statements, my current will, pension details. As I left his office, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: a sense of control. That night, I spread everything out on my bed: my old will naming Alana and Darius as heirs, the deed to the house, my pension papers. For years, I'd treated these documents like something sacred I was only holding onto until my children claimed them. Now, for the first time, I looked at them as mine. The next week, I opened a new account at a bank across town. I had the pension redirected there. I moved what little savings I had. In the old account, the one my kids knew about, I left just enough to pay utilities and groceries. If they ever peeked, they'd see what I wanted them to see: a mother barely getting by. Then I started selling things I didn't need: extra furniture, old clothes, decorative pieces I'd kept out of habit. Rosa helped me post them online, meet buyers, count the cash. It wasn't a fortune, but each small bill I slid into my new account felt like a brick in the foundation of my escape. Because that's what it had become, clearly in my mind. Not just a boundary, not just a bit of distance, but a full escape. I sat at the computer one evening and searched something I'd never dared to before: retirement communities by the ocean. My hands shook as I scrolled through photos of modest apartments overlooking water, places where the biggest drama was who brought cookies to bingo night. One listing captured me: a small coastal town called Harborview, far enough to feel like a different world, close enough that I could still get there by bus. Clean air, quiet streets, affordable places for seniors. A view of the sea I'd spent my whole life imagining but never touching. I wrote down the name. Harborview, just seeing it on paper made my heart flutter. Later that night, I went to my bedroom, opened the nightstand drawer, and took out the envelope that held my bus ticket. Already bought, already dated, tucked away like a secret promise I was making to myself. One way to Harborview, departure in 2 months. 2 months to set everything in motion. 2 months to cut the last invisible strings tying me to a life where I was only valued for what I gave. 2 months before Margaret Ellis disappeared from the city and became someone new. There was still one thing left to do, though, something I owed myself more than I owed them. I needed my children to hear the truth from my own mouth. Once the legal work was in motion and the ticket was safely tucked away, my days started to feel different. I wasn't just waking up to more of the same. I was waking up with a mission. Daniel and I met again. He showed me the draft of my new will. In it, my children's names appeared only where I chose, not by default. I reduced what they'd receive to a token amount, more out of closure than obligation. The rest would go where it might actually do some good. He also gave me official letters confirming the changes to my accounts and beneficiaries, all dated, all signed. He slid copies across the desk to me. "You keep these somewhere safe," he said, "just in case anyone ever questions your decisions." I walked home lighter, as if someone had peeled off a layer of invisible weight. But I still needed proof of something. Proof for myself, if nothing else. Proof that what I'd seen online wasn't a one-off fling, that their lies about money weren't misunderstandings but deliberate choices. So I became, in my own quiet way, a detective. I knew where Darius worked. One Tuesday, I took the bus across town and sat on a bench near the auto shop, pretending to read a book while keeping my eyes on the entrance. A little after 5, he came out. He wasn't alone. A young woman walked beside him, laughing, her hand resting on his arm. They headed straight toward a sleek car parked at the curb, the same one I'd seen on his social media. I watched as he opened the door for her, watched them drive off together. I followed on the next bus, heart pounding like I was the one doing something wrong. They stopped at an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. From the sidewalk outside, I could see them through the window, ordering wine, laughing, sharing dessert. I pictured his voice from a week earlier. "We'll be in trouble if we don't pay these bills, Ma." There he was, trouble-free, spending what I had sacrificed to give him on fancy dinners and romantic nights. The next day, it was Alana's turn. I knew where her office was at the mall. I went there around lunchtime and waited by the corridor. She came out with 2 friends, all 3 of them stylish and carefree. I followed them into an expensive clothing store, pretending to browse while I listened. She held up a red dress in front of the mirror, price tag dangling, $200. "It looks amazing on you," one friend said. "Buy it," the other urged. "You deserve it." Alana hesitated for a heartbeat, then smiled. "Well, the debts are cleared now. I can treat myself." Cleared, the same debts she had described to me as crushing and urgent, the ones she'd insisted I help cover. My chest buzzed with a sharp kind of clarity. It wasn't just that they were careless. It was that they had learned to see me not as a person, but as a resource to be tapped whenever they wanted to upgrade their lives. I left the store before they saw me, went home, and wrote it all down: dates, places, what they said, what they did. I added those notes to the folder with my receipts and screenshots. Then I called Daniel and told him everything. This confirms what we already knew, he said. You're not overreacting. You're responding appropriately to ongoing manipulative behavior. Ongoing manipulation. Hearing him name it like that helped me stop making excuses for them in my own head. Meanwhile, Rosa became my daily support. She'd come by with small things: fresh bread, stories about her grandchildren, jokes to make me laugh when my resolve wavered. One afternoon, she looked at the calendar where I had marked the departure date with a small blue circle. You've given them 50 years, she said. Give yourself these next 10 or 15. Don't spend your last years waiting for people who only remember you when they're desperate. I nodded, feeling tears burn the corners of my eyes. I'm scared, I admitted. Of course you are, she said. Doing the right thing is almost always scary. Do it anyway. That night, I opened my drawer and held the ticket again. One way, Harborview, 2 months. A new thought sparked in me. I don't just want to leave. I want them to understand why. Not so they can fix it, not anymore, but so I can walk away knowing I spoke my truth. I decided I would do it in my own way, on my own terms, not in a messy fight, not over a rushed phone call. I would invite them to dinner, a final supper in the same house where I had cooked for them 1,000 times. Only this time, they wouldn't be the ones taking something from me. This time, I would be the one taking something back: my life. I circled a Saturday 3 weeks away on my calendar. The date sat there like a heartbeat. Every time I walked past it, I reminded myself, that's the night I stopped being their victim. First, I called Alana. She answered on the fourth ring. Hey, Mama, everything okay? She asked, voice distracted, probably scrolling or multitasking as usual. I want to have a family dinner, I told her. Just the three of us. It's been a long time since we sat down together properly. I have something important to tell you and your brother. Is it bad? She asked quickly. Are you sick? No, I said. I'm not sick, I just need you there. It's important. She hesitated. I could hear her thinking, weighing whether this was worth her time. Then, fine, I'll be there. I hung up and called Darius. The conversation played out almost the same way: distracted tone, immediate concern I might be sick, reluctant agreement. They both said they would come. They always said they would come. This time, though, I wasn't waiting with blind hope. I was preparing with cold clarity. Over the next 3 weeks, I built my case like a lawyer and my courage like a soldier. I printed the screenshots from their chat, the pictures from social media. I organized the receipts and totals. I put Daniel's letters and my new will in a neat stack, with sticky notes marking the important lines. I also prepared 3 envelopes, one for each of them, and one for Rosa. In Rosa's envelope, I placed $500 and a handwritten note thanking her for reminding me that I was still worth something. In Alana's envelope, I put a key to a safety deposit box I had rented with some of her father's photographs and letters inside. Not money, memories. In Darius's envelope, I placed the same: a key and a note explaining what it opened. I decided that if they wanted something from me, they could have the one thing they'd never bothered to ask for: a piece of their father and the past we once shared. A week before the dinner, my phone rang. Darius. Ma, I need a favor, he said, not even bothering with small talk. My car's acting up. The repair's gonna run about 500. If I don't get it fixed, I can't get to work. Can you help? There it was again, the script. I don't have it, I said calmly. We'll talk at dinner. That's in a week, Ma. I can't wait that long. This is urgent. I don't have it, I repeated. He huffed. Fine, he snapped and hung up. 2 days later, I saw a new picture on his profile. Him standing proudly in front of the same car, freshly washed and shining, captioned with a joke about finally riding smooth again. The lies weren't even subtle anymore. The days crawled toward Saturday. Every time doubt popped up. What if you're being too harsh? What if they really do love you? I replayed Mother's Day in my mind: the empty table, the Ellis kids' chat, the old lady. Doubt didn't stand a chance against that. Rosa came by the morning of the dinner. Together, we planned the order of the evening like choreography. The meal first, then the evidence, then the announcement. You don't owe them a performance, she said, but if you're going to give them the truth, give it to them clearly. No room for twisting. I'm afraid I'll cry, I admitted. Cry if you must, she replied, but don't back down. Tears don't mean weakness, they mean you're human. They haven't remembered that in a long time. After she left, I cleaned the house, not for them, but for me. I wanted the place to look dignified, not desperate. I pulled out the good dishes again, the same ones I'd used on that cursed Mother's Day, but this time with a different intention. I cooked their favorite foods from childhood: roasted chicken, scalloped potatoes, a fresh salad, homemade bread, a chocolate dessert. Not as an offering, but as a reminder. By 6 o'clock, everything was ready. The envelopes and papers waited on a sideboard. The ticket stayed in my bedroom drawer, a quiet promise. I took a shower, put on my best black dress, and brushed my hair until it shone as much as white hair can. I added a touch of lipstick and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't just see an old woman, I saw a woman about to take her life back. At 7 sharp, I saw headlights outside, Darius's car. I watched from the window as they stepped out, Alana in a fitted dress, Darius in a crisp shirt. They walked toward the house laughing, completely unaware that this would be the last time they walked through my door as the people they'd always been. I opened the door before they could knock. "Come in," I said, my voice steady. "I've been expecting you." They stepped inside like it was any other visit. Alana gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, careful not to smudge her makeup. Darius gave me a half hug, his eyes already drifting toward the dining room, drawn by the smell of food. "House looks nice, Ma," he said. "It always does," Alana added, glancing around with mild approval. I offered them something to drink and poured them each a glass of cheap wine. I didn't bother with the good bottle. That was for another life, another place. We sat in the living room for a few minutes, talking about nothing: traffic, weather, their jobs, the kind of superficial conversation we'd perfected over the years, designed to avoid anything too real. After a while, I stood. "Dinner's ready," I said. "Let's eat first, then we'll talk." They followed me into the dining room, and for a moment they both paused. The table was set beautifully: china, silverware, candles, everything in its place. "Wow," Alana said, "this looks amazing." "What's the occasion?" Darius asked. "It's a special night," I replied. "You'll see why." We ate. They complimented the food, reminisced briefly about when they were kids and how I'd always cooked too much. They laughed about old stories that painted them as adorable troublemakers and me as the eternally patient mother. I smiled when it was polite, but mostly I watched. I searched their faces for some sign of the children they used to be, some flicker of genuine love that might make me hesitate. All I saw were two comfortable adults confident that I would always be there, always forgiving, always paying. When the plates were cleared and the dessert was done, I excused myself and walked into the kitchen. I took a deep breath, picked up the tray I had prepared, papers, printed screenshots, and the 3 envelopes, and brought it back to the dining room. I set the tray down in the center of the table. Their eyes locked onto it instantly, curiosity sparking. If they were expecting an inheritance announcement, they weren't entirely wrong, but not in the way they imagined. "What's all this, Mama?" Alana asked. I sat, folded my hands, and looked at each of them. My voice came out steady and clear. "I asked you here because I can't keep living like this," I began. "And because there are things you need to know before I go." Alana's brow furrowed. "Before you go where?" "Let me finish," I said. "You've had years to talk. Tonight you're going to listen." They exchanged a glance but said nothing. "I know more than you think," I continued. "I know how you really see me. I know what you've done with the money I gave you. I know what you say about me when you think I'm not listening." Alana shifted in her seat. Darius's jaw tightened. I picked up the first stack, printed screenshots of their Ellis kids chat, and slid them toward the middle of the table. "Read," I said. They lowered their eyes. Alana's hand trembled as she recognized the messages. "Did you ask the old lady yet?" "Not yet, but I know what to say. She always falls for it." "Poor thing, she can fund us a little longer." Color drained from Alana's face. Darius's eyes darted over the words, then up to me. "Mama, that's—" "Don't," I cut in. "Don't you dare say it's a joke. Don't you dare insult me by lying again. Those messages are from 2 weeks ago, not years. And they match exactly how you've treated me." "Mama, I didn't mean—" Alana started. "I'm not interested in what you meant," I said. "I'm interested in what you did." I placed another stack on the table. The list of every payment I'd made to them over the past 5 years. The total circled at the bottom. $20,000, I said quietly. "That's what I've given you, from my pension, from my savings. From money I should have spent on my health, my comfort, my old age. You called it emergencies. You called it survival. You said you couldn't pay your rent, your bills, your debts." I reached for the photos I'd printed from their social media and spread them out. Alana at restaurants on trips in new dresses, Darius with his car at concerts living large. "But this is what you did with it," I went on. "Fancy dinners, trips, clothes, new cars." While I sat here in this house turning off the heat to save money and cutting my pills in half, tears spilled down Alana's cheeks. Mama, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. You didn't care, I corrected. There's a difference. Darius stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. This is ridiculous, he snapped. You're going through our private conversations, our social media, tallying up every little thing. I'm tallying up my life, I said sharply. The life I spent giving you everything I had, while you gave me excuses and silence. He clenched his fists. We were just venting. You know, people say things they don't mean when they're stressed. Stressed? I repeated. You mean stressed like I was on Mother's Day? Sitting at a table set for you while you were at a party calling it a perfect day? Do you know what my day was? I waited. I cried. I put food away that no one ate. And that same night, you showed up at my door smelling like alcohol and perfume, asking for $3,000. The room fell silent. I could hear their breathing. I could hear my own heart steady now. That night, I continued, something inside me finally broke. Not my love, I will always love you, whether you deserve it or not, but my illusion. I understood that to you, I wasn't a mother anymore, I was a resource. And I decided I was done. I reached for the official documents and placed them on the table. These, I said, are the changes I've made. This is my new will. These are the papers showing that I have moved my money. You will not inherit automatically. You will not have access to my accounts. There will be no more loans, no more help. Alana stared at the papers as if they were written in another language. Mama, you can't do this, she whispered. We're your children. I can, I said calmly, and I have. Darius's face flushed with anger. We have rights, we're family. You have the right to live your life, I replied, but not at my expense. Family is not a license to abuse someone's love and call it help. This is Ellie's fault, Alana snapped suddenly, misnaming my friend out of habit. Or Rose's, or whoever you've been talking to. Someone put these ideas in your head. I felt a strange calm. Rosa is the only one who has treated me like a person in years, I said. The only one who doesn't come knocking when she needs money. The only one who asks how I'm really doing and waits for the answer. Don't you dare speak ill of her. I picked up the envelopes and slid one to each of them. These are yours, I said. They're not money, they're something else. Open them now or later, it doesn't matter to me. Alana tore hers open with shaky hands and pulled out the key and note. A safety deposit box? She murmured. Your father's letters, pictures, little things from when you were small. I kept them all these years. That's what I choose to give you now, not because you deserve them, but because I won't take your memories, even if you never cared much for mine. Darius stared at his envelope but didn't open it. Mama, we can fix this, Alana said suddenly, desperation in her voice. We messed up, I know we did, but we can change, just give us one more chance. No, I said softly but firmly. You've had more chances than I can count. Every time I wiped my tears and picked up the phone again, that was a chance. Every holiday you skipped, every lie you told, every time I said, it's okay, when it wasn't, I'm out of chances now. For my own sake, Darius stepped closer, putting his hands on my shoulders. You're angry, I get it, but you're going to regret this when you calm down. We're all you have. I gently removed his hands. That, I said, is exactly the problem. Because all I have is two grown children who don't know how to love me without using me, and I'd rather have nothing than keep pretending that's enough. I stood and walked to the front door. My knees didn't shake this time. Dinner is over, I said. You need to leave. Alana sobbed, clutching the key in her fist. Darius looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was, finally. They walked past me and out into the night. At the doorstep, Darius turned back. This isn't over, Ma, he said. We'll talk when you're thinking straight. There won't be another talk, I replied. Not like this. Good night, Darius. Goodbye, Alana. They got into the car. I watched the taillights recede down the street, red dots shrinking into the dark. When they disappeared completely, I closed the door and leaned against it. I waited for sorrow, for panic, for guilt. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, relief. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel quite the same. The silence wasn't heavy anymore, it was spacious, like a room that had finally been cleared of clutter. I went back to the dining room. The table was a mess, crumbs, empty glasses, papers still spread out like evidence at a crime scene. I gathered the documents, stacked them neatly, and put them back in their folder. The receipts, the screenshots, the legal papers. Proof that I had not imagined any of it. Then I cleared the dishes, washed them slowly, dried them, and put them away. It felt less like cleaning up after dinner and more like closing a chapter. In the weeks that followed, my phone stayed still. No calls, no messages. No, how are you, Mama? Not even an angry text. Part of me expected them to come storming back, to argue, to demand, to insist I change things back. Instead, they retreated into the same silence they had gifted me for years, only this time, I welcomed it. I met with Daniel one last time to sign the final versions of the documents. Everything was now official and filed properly. "You've done something very brave," he said as we shook hands. "I've done something very late," I answered, "but better late than never." Rosa came over almost every day as my departure date grew closer. We packed up what I truly needed: clothes, important papers, a few keepsakes that meant something to me and me alone. Everything else I either donated, sold, or left behind. "You sure you don't want to tell them you're leaving?" Rosa asked one afternoon as we taped up the last box. I thought about it, about leaving a note, about calling, about one more conversation full of promises I no longer believed. "No," I said finally. I already told them everything that mattered. If they had listened, truly listened, they'd understand why I'm gone. On the last night in the house, I slept surprisingly well. No tossing, no spiraling thoughts, just a quiet sort of acceptance. I had done my grieving years ago, on lonely holidays, on unpaid birthdays, on nights when I stared at my phone hoping it would ring. This now was something else. In the morning, I dressed in comfortable clothes, made myself a simple breakfast, and walked through each room one final time. The scuffed wall in the hallway where Darius used to run his toy cars. The corner where Alana sat with crayons and coloring books. The kitchen where I'd cooked meals they barely remembered. I paused by the table where I'd spent Mother's Day alone and laid my hand on the wood. "Thank you," I whispered, not to the table, not to the house, but to the version of myself who had held on for so long. "You did the best you could. Now it's my turn." Rosa drove me to the bus station. We hugged for a long time at the platform, both of us crying openly. "You call me when you get there," she said. "I want to hear about that ocean." "I will," I promised. "And you come visit, I'll show you the sea." The bus pulled in with a sigh of brakes. I handed the driver my ticket, one way to Harborview, and found a window seat. As the bus pulled away, I watched the city recede, the familiar streets shrinking into a blur of color and memory. Somewhere out there, my children were living their lives, maybe angry, maybe confused, maybe unchanged. I couldn't control that. I couldn't fix them. I couldn't go back and redo the past, but I could choose the rest of my story. Hours later, the scenery changed. Concrete gave way to fields, fields gave way to small towns, and eventually, the air itself smelled different, saltier, lighter. When we finally arrived at Harborview, I stepped off the bus and heard it for the first time. The ocean, roaring softly in the distance like a long-kept promise. I made my way to the modest room I had rented in a small senior community overlooking the water. The place was simple, but it was mine. No one knew my name there. No one expected me to be anything but Margaret, just another woman in her 70s figuring out how to savor what was left of life. That first evening, I walked to the shore. The wind was cool, and the sky was streaked with pink and gold. I stood there, shoes sinking slightly into the sand, and let the sound of the waves drown out the echoes of old arguments and unspoken hurts. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like the old lady. I didn't feel like a walking wallet. I didn't feel like a forgotten mother waiting by the phone. I felt like a person. My story didn't end with a grand apology from my children or a dramatic reunion where everyone suddenly became kind and aware. Sometimes, real life doesn't offer that kind of ending. Sometimes, the victory is quieter. It's an older woman buying a one-way ticket and refusing to keep paying for her own mistreatment. It's a mother choosing her dignity over her fear of being alone. It's someone like me standing in front of the ocean, finally understanding that loving your children doesn't mean letting them destroy you. I don't know what Alana and Darius tell people about me now. Maybe they say I abandoned them. Maybe they say I changed. Maybe they don't talk about me at all. But I know what I tell myself when I wake up each morning and hear the waves outside my window. "Margaret, you chose you. And that, after everything, was the bravest thing you ever did." And if anyone out there hears my story and recognizes themselves in it, an invisible parent, a used up caregiver, a heart that's been taken for granted for too long, I hope they remember this. You are allowed to stop funding people who only remember you when they're in need. You are allowed to write a new chapter, even if you're 70. You are allowed to buy your own one-way ticket. And if your children ever decide to grow into the kind of people who truly see you, truly respect you, truly love you, they'll know where to find you. Not at a table set for three with two empty chairs, but somewhere by the water, finally living your own life. I thought leaving would mean I'd never hear from them again. I was wrong. For the first few weeks in Harborview, my days were quiet in a way that almost felt strange. I woke up without an alarm, made coffee without watching the clock, and walked down to the water whenever I felt like it. No one calling, no one texting urgent with a dollar amount attached. At first, my hand still reached for my phone out of habit. I'd glance at it in the mornings, half expecting to see Mama, can you talk? Or Mama, I need a favor. There was nothing, no missed calls, no voicemails, no messages. You'd think that would hurt, and for a while it did. It stung to realize that taking away my money meant taking away most of their contact too. But as the days ticked by, something odd happened. The silence stopped feeling like rejection and started feeling like freedom. Harborview wasn't glamorous, but it was kind. My building was full of people like me, older, carrying their own history of losses and quiet disappointments. There was a woman down the hall who had outlived 3 husbands and called herself unlucky in love, but blessed in stamina. There was a retired teacher who collected seashells and stories. There was a man who had moved there after his children inherited his house and promptly sold it. We were a small tribe of the left behind and the just done trying. Most afternoons, I'd sit on a bench facing the ocean, letting the sound of the waves work on me like a slow medicine. Sometimes I'd think about Alana and Darius, where they were, what they were doing if they were still angry. Other times, I'd force myself not to think about them at all. One cool, breezy morning, I joined a walking group organized by the community center. Nothing serious, just a handful of seniors strolling along the boardwalk, complaining about their knees and laughing about everything else. First time? An older man named Charles asked as he matched my pace. Yes, I said. I just moved here. Running from something or running to something? He teased. Both, I replied, surprising myself with my honesty. He nodded like he understood. Happens a lot around here. People show up with suitcases and ghosts. The ocean's good at taking some of the weight. At night, I'd sit by my window with a cup of tea and watch the lights from boats flicker in the distance. I started journaling, not about my children, but about myself, what I liked, what I wanted to try, what I regretted not doing sooner. For decades, if you'd asked, who is Margaret? I would have answered, I'm Alana and Darius's mother. Now, slowly, I was learning how to answer that question without their names. Then, one afternoon, about 3 months after I arrived, my phone buzzed. The sound startled me. It had been mostly quiet since I'd left, aside from Rose's calls and a few check-ins from Daniel to make sure everything remained in order. I picked it up expecting to see Rose's name. Instead, I saw Alana. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the green button. A mix of guilt, anger, and something like grief rose up. I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. Then I answered, hello? There was a pause, then a shaky breath. Mama. Her voice hit me like a memory. 12 years old, scraped knee, calling for help. Only now she was a grown woman, and the injury was something she couldn't bandage on her own. Yes, Alana, I'm here. Where are you? She asked immediately. I went by the house. It's empty. Your number was disconnected. I thought, her voice broke off. I thought something happened to you. Something did happen, I said calmly. I left. Why? She whispered, as if she didn't already know 100 reasons. I didn't rush to answer. I let the silence sit there, thick and honest. Eventually, I said, because staying was killing me slowly. Because I was tired of being nothing but a wallet with a beating heart. Mama, that's not fair, she protested weakly. We love you. I don't doubt you feel something, I replied. I'm just not sure it's the kind of love that shows up when I'm lonely instead of when you're broke. She was quiet for a moment. I could hear city noise in the background, cars, distant music, a life still spinning fast. Why didn't you tell us you were leaving? She asked. I did, I said softly. Maybe not in those exact words. But when I told you I was done giving, when I put the papers on the table, when I showed you how you treated me, that was me walking out the door. You just didn't believe I'd actually go through it. Another silence. Then a small voice. Are you okay? The question surprised me. It was the first time in a long time she'd asked it without it being followed by because I need. Yes, I answered honestly. For the first time in years, I'm more than okay. Can we come see you? She asked. The request twisted something inside me. The old Margaret would have said yes without thinking, already picturing the visit, already planning meals. The new Margaret, the one who had stood at her own door and told them to leave, hesitated. Why? I asked quietly. To talk about us, to try to fix things. To, she trailed off as if realizing she wasn't sure. I don't know. I miss you. I believed her. I also didn't fully trust her, not yet, maybe not ever in the same way. I'm not ready for a visit, I said gently. Not yet. What if something happens to you and I never get to see you again? She blurted out. I closed my eyes. That was always a possibility, Alana. Every year I spent alone at that table, that risk was there. It just bothered you more when I decided to stop waiting. She cried then. Real tears, or at least they sounded real. I didn't hang up, I didn't soften either. We can talk, I offered. On the phone, letters, maybe one day if enough changes you can visit, but I won't go back to the way things were. Not in my heart and not in my bank account. She sniffed. Darius is mad, she confessed. He says you chose strangers over your own family. I chose myself, I said. If that feels like betrayal to him, that says more about his expectations than my actions. We talked a little longer, surface things at first, then small details. She asked about the ocean. I described the sound of the waves at night. For a moment, it almost felt like we were two women simply talking, not a mother and daughter trying to cross a canyon carved by years of neglect. Before we hung up, she asked, "Do you still love us?" "Of course," I replied. Love doesn't disappear, but trust does, and respect. Those have to be rebuilt, not assumed. After the call ended, I stood at my window for a long time, watching the water. There was a heaviness in my chest, but it wasn't the crushing weight of before. It was something else, grief and relief braided together. They knew I was alive now. They knew I had left by choice, not by accident. What they did with that knowledge was up to them. For the first time in a long time, what I did next was up to me. That night, as the waves whispered their endless song outside, I made myself a quiet promise. If they came looking for me one day, truly looking, not for money, not for convenience, but for me, I would be here. But I would never again dim my own life just to make room for people who only showed up when they needed something. Not even if those people were my children. Months passed, seasons shifted. The ocean changed clothes, sparkling blue some days, steel gray on others, always moving, always a reminder that even the most constant things in life are never truly still. I settled into a rhythm. Mornings by the water, afternoons reading in the common room or chatting with neighbors, evenings cooking small meals just for myself, measured by my appetite, not someone else's expectations. Sometimes at the community center, we'd have group discussions. Themes like regrets, second chances, forgiveness. People would share stories about children they hadn't seen in years, siblings who stopped calling, spouses who chose work or addiction over family. When it was my turn, I told them mine, about a woman who gave everything she had to her children and realized, too late, that she had saved nothing for herself. "Do you regret it?" someone asked once. "Cutting them off like that?" I thought about it hard. "I regret not having boundaries sooner," I said honestly. "I regret teaching them by my silence that my feelings didn't matter. I regret every time I wiped my own tears and still reached for my purse. But leaving, drawing that line, no, I don't regret that." "You don't miss them?" another voice asked gently. "Every day," I answered. "Missing someone and letting them hurt you are two different things." Letters started to arrive occasionally. Not often, not regularly, but every so often, a white envelope with familiar handwriting would show up in my small mailbox. Alana wrote more than Darius. Her first few letters were half apology, half defense. "We were stressed. We didn't know how bad it was for you. We thought you'd always be there." I wrote back not to excuse but to explain. "I was there," I wrote once, "for so long that I forgot I was allowed to leave." As time went on, her letters changed. She started telling me about her own life in a more honest way. About nights she sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone, too proud to call. About realizing she'd picked friends and boyfriends who treated her much like she had treated me, only reaching out when they needed something. "It hurts," she wrote, "and I hate to admit it, but now I know a little of what you must have felt." Painfully poetic, I thought, that she had to feel that kind of loneliness to understand mine. Still, it was something, a seed of empathy that hadn't been there before. Darius didn't write often, but when he did, his letters were short and stiff at first. "Hope you're good," he wrote once. "I'm working more now." Another time. "I got into some financial trouble. Thought about asking you for help. Didn't, felt weird. Then I figured out a way to fix it myself. You'd probably be proud of that." I was, more than he knew. In one of his later letters, months after the first call from Alana, he finally said it. "I was mad at you for leaving. I told myself you chose other people over us. But deep down, I think I was mad because you finally did what I never thought you would, say no. And I didn't know who I was without the version of you that always said yes." I read that line 3 times, like I had once read the old lady in their group chat. Back then, the words shattered me. Now, these words stitched something small but important back together. We weren't healed. We weren't fixed. But we were, at least, honest. Rosa visited me once, hobbling stubbornly from the train station with a suitcase that seemed heavier than she was. We sat by the water, two old women with more past than future, and I told her everything about the calls, the letters, the slow, fragile shifts. So, she asked, squinting at the waves, you think you'll let them visit? Maybe one day, I said. If they come for me, not for what I can give them. If they show they can stand on their own feet without using my back as a floor. And if they never do, I watched a gull swoop low across the water and then rise again. Then I'll still have had this, I said. These years for myself, this ocean, this peace, this knowledge that at least once in my life I chose me. One evening, I was sitting on the bench near the boardwalk when a younger woman from the community, 40 something, caring for a mother with dementia, sat beside me. She knew bits and pieces of my story. Can I ask you something? She said. Of course. How did you do it? How did you stop feeling guilty for putting yourself first? I sighed. Who says I stopped feeling guilty? She blinked. I still have moments, I admitted. Days when I wonder if I was too harsh. Nights when I stare at the ceiling and think, what if I had just given them one more chance? Guilt doesn't evaporate just because you did the right thing. It just sits in a different room. So what changed then? She asked. What I listened to, I said. For years, I listened to the guilt more than anything else. I let it drive every decision. Now, when guilt speaks, I hear it. But I don't hand it the steering wheel anymore. She was quiet for a long time, then she nodded. I hope I'm as brave as you when I'm older. I smiled sadly. I hope you don't wait as long as I did. That night, back in my little apartment, I sat at my table, the same way I used to sit in my old house, but the feeling was completely different. There was no table set for three with two empty chairs. No cold food waiting for people who wouldn't come, just one plate, one cup, one woman, me. I realized something then. We talk a lot about parents who abandon their children. We whisper about mothers who leave, fathers who walk away. But we don't talk enough about the quiet, invisible way some children abandon their parents long before anyone moves out. The unanswered calls, the broken promises, the way they remember us when they're in need and forget us when they're in love, or busy, or having fun. We don't talk about the mothers who are left behind emotionally, but still expected to show up financially and physically. If anyone ever asked me now what my story is, I would tell them this. I am a woman who loved her children fiercely and imperfectly. I am a mother who gave too much and learned, at 70, that love without boundaries becomes self betrayal. I am a person who bought a one-way ticket not because she stopped loving her family, but because she finally started loving herself too. Maybe one day, Alana and Darius will stand beside me on this shore, watching the waves and talking to me like I'm more than a backup plan. Maybe they'll grow into people who know how to give as well as take. But whether that day comes or not, my story doesn't hinge on their transformation anymore. My story hinges on this simple, radical truth. I was worthy of respect, even when they refused to give it. I was worthy of peace, even when they tried to buy it from me with guilt. I was worthy of a life that wasn't always lived in service to everyone but myself. And when I finally believed that, I did the bravest thing I could. I stopped waiting at the window, cleared the table, packed my bags, and took my own heart by the hand all the way to the ocean, where, at last, I learned that sometimes the most powerful, I love you, you'll ever say is the one you whisper to yourself. The morning of my 71st birthday arrived quietly, the way most mornings do in Harborview. Soft light through thin curtains, the distant hum of gulls circling above the shore, the ocean murmuring its endless secrets. I hadn't expected anything special from the day. A walk on the boardwalk, maybe a slice of cake from the bakery Rosa always insisted I try, maybe a call from her if her knees were behaving that morning. I certainly didn't expect what happened next. A knock, not a loud, urgent knock. A hesitant one, three gentle taps as if the person on the other side wasn't sure they were welcome. I opened the door and there they were, Alana and Darius. Standing together, nervous, older somehow, not in years but in expression, in humility, in something softened and reshaped by time. For a moment none of us spoke. The ocean filled the silence between us like a witness. Finally, Alana stepped forward. She held a bouquet, not extravagant, just wildflowers tied with a simple ribbon. Happy birthday, Mama, she whispered. The sound of her voice, steady, not rehearsed, not desperate, hit something deep inside me. Darius cleared his throat. Can we come in? I hesitated, not because I didn't love them, but because I had learned the power of permission, of choosing who enters my space and when, of not saying yes out of habit, fear, or guilt. I opened the door wider. Come in. They stepped inside slowly, as if afraid their footsteps would break the fragile peace of the room. They looked around, not to judge, but to understand the space I had built without them. Alana touched the seashells on my coffee table. Darius glanced at my books stacked near the window. They weren't the children who once stormed into my house demanding help. They weren't the adults who treated me like a resource. They were just two human beings who had finally recognized their mother's absence in their lives and their own part in creating that absence. We've been thinking a lot, Alana said, sitting carefully on the edge of the couch. Talking. About everything, about you. Darius nodded, staring at his hands. We messed up for years. We didn't just take advantage of you, we took you for granted. And when you left, it hit us. It hit us hard, Alana added quietly. I sat across from them, hands folded, heart steady. Why now? Darius looked up. Because we finally stopped blaming you long enough to see the truth. You weren't running away from us. You were running towards something you should have had a long time ago. Peace, Alana whispered. Respect, a life of your own. A tear rolled down her cheek, but this time I didn't rush to comfort her. I let her feel it. We want to try, she said. Not to get anything from you, not to fix everything overnight, just to be better, to deserve a place in your life again. I looked at them, really looked. Not as the children I once raised, not as the adults who once hurt me, but as two people who had finally understood that love is a responsibility, not a loophole. I took a slow breath. I'm not the same woman I was, I said, and I will never go back to that version of me. But if you want to build something new, with honesty, with boundaries, with respect, then yes, we can begin. They both exhaled, relief softening their shoulders. Darius gave a small, crooked smile. Can we take you to lunch? For your birthday? Nothing fancy, just time together. Time, the one thing I used to beg for when they had none to spare. Now they were offering it freely, without expectation, without agenda. I nodded. Let me get my coat. We walked out together. Three silhouettes in the coastal morning light, no longer mother as martyr or children as takers, but simply three people trying, learning, and healing. As we reached the boardwalk, the wind carried the smell of salt and possibility. The ocean glittered like it was celebrating something only it understood. And as we walked, slowly, side by side, I realized something important. Leaving didn't break my family, it rebuilt it. By breaking the cycle, I gave all of us a chance to start again, not as the family we used to be, but as the one we might still become. And for the first time in a long, long time, that was enough.